Okay, good evening everyone. Thank you for coming along tonight. If I can just ask you to remain standing while Mark says prayers and makes any comments he likes to. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Well, as an opening prayer for the next few council meetings, I'd like to use the Lord's Prayer. And I've got a few reasons for that. First of all, because it's so familiar. In fact, I imagine many of you memorised it as a child. But because it is familiar, it does mean something to us, whereas a new prayer sometimes you can just forget. I want to use it secondly because it's relevant for a council meeting. Part of the prayer actually is about good government. See if you can work out which part. And thirdly, because it's so comprehensive, it's a wonderful summary of the whole of the Christian faith. But finally, because it's so good and so powerful, I believe if we prayed this prayer and meant it, it would change our lives and change the world. So let's pray together. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen.
Amen. Okay, thank you. Would you like to sit down, please? Okay, if we can go straight on to the agenda. Item number 1 is the evacuation procedure. We're not expecting any fire alarms to go off tonight, so if they do, we'll treat them for real. And if we can evacuate the building either through these doors at the side of the chamber, down the stairs and out the front door, meet across the road at the Yorkshire Bank, or alternatively, if you're in the gallery, I believe there's a fire exit to the end of the gallery as well. It's also a timely reminder to ask people to turn their phones off. I've left mine somewhere else just in case it goes off again. Turn your phones off or set them to silent, please. And also, just to tell people that as we do in pretty much all of our meetings at the council now, they are recorded and then sent out on YouTube the next day or the day after. Item number 2 is to receive apologies for absence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've received apologies from Councillor Margrave, Councillor Tandy, Councillor Doughty and Councillor Tony Lloyd.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Margrave is here, I notice.
Oh, sorry.
Came up through the cellar, I think. And members will note now as well, there's an item number 3, just to remind people if they can turn their microphones on before speaking, turn them off when they're finished speaking, just so that the cameras turn to them to enable the filming. Item number 4 is to confirm the minutes of the annual council meeting held on the 17th of May and the extraordinary meeting held on the 24th of May. Are you happy that I sign those? Yeah, okay, thank you.
I'll give just subject to Councillor Smith.
Oh, sorry, yeah, which one was that on?
24th of May.
Yeah, the 24th of May one, Councillor Smith was in attendance, it wasn't recorded, so that's been changed, Councillor Smith. Okay, thank you. Okay, that takes us on to item number 5, which is to receive declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other interests in matters under consideration pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 4A2. Yeah, Councillor, sorry. Councillor Elliott. Have you pressed you?
One of the items in the public gallery, one of the questions, I just need to declare that I too am a member of Square Peg.
Okay, thank you.
To declare that I'm Chair of Governors at Stockingford Early Years Centre. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry, Council.
Years Centre.
Declare my sister and my nephews are members of Square Peg and rely on those services, so I declare an interest in regard to that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that takes us on to announcements from the Mayor, Leader, members of the Cabinet or the Managing Director. Councillor Harvey, do you have anything?
No, thank you.
Alan?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't have anything specifically on item 6, but if I could move on with your permission to item 7.
Okay, just before we do that, I've just got a couple of things I wish to say. First of all, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody that was involved with both the Nuneaton and the Bulkington carnivals. The weather was kind to everybody, perhaps a bit too kind at times. It was a bit hot, but there were fantastic community events, and it was really encouraging to see more and more people involved in them, and let's hope that that even improves for next year again. Just to make people aware as well, as part of our fundraising thing, we've got a charity bowls match at the Flat Green Bowls where they play marbles in Nuneaton against the Crown Green Bowlers of Bedworth. That's this Friday night starting at 6 o'clock if anybody wants to come along. And the last thing I want to do, but very importantly, members will see, Dave, would you mind just... There's an absolutely beautiful box been brought to the council to be added to the silver collection, and the lady that brought it travelled from some distance away. It was quite an emotional meeting, but she was insistent that she didn't want to have any recognition for herself, but I think as it's become like from the last member of the family, they wanted it put back into the silver. It was actually awarded to a councillor in 1948 when he became an alderman of the old Nuneaton Council. Sorry? Yeah, it was Alderman Randall. He'd been the mayor twice, I think, Dave, wasn't it? And actually, we have looked inside it and looked at the scroll inside it is absolutely pristine. It's I don't think it's been out of the box until we looked at it. And from a personal point of view, I think that's probably the best place for it to stay. It may be that we can get a copy of it so it can be displayed. But nevertheless, it's a fantastic addition to the silver collection from an important person in the past. Right, thank you. And clearly, if any member wants to have a look at it, it will be at an appropriate place in the silver collection as soon as we can find a proper place for it. Okay, that takes us on to item number 7, censure of a member. Alan?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I would read out a censure to Councillor Keith Kondaka. The background to the censure that was on the 11th of April 2017, the Standards Local Hearing Panel was established to hold a hearing into a complaint against you that you failed to comply with paragraph 5 of the Council's Code of Conduct, which states you must not conduct yourself in a manner which could reasonably bring your office or the authority into disrepute. The circumstances giving rise to the complaint were as follows. In February and August 2015, you had requested details of the structure changes of the Economic Development Service. This information was provided to you in your capacity as a councillor. Following the restructure, 2 vacancies arose in the department which were recruited to. One of these officers left, and to promote recruitment to the team, a video had been posted on YouTube on the 28th of August 2015. On the 31st of August 2015, you had posted a comment on YouTube regarding the recruitment video, stating several people who have worked in the team before have been made redundant or left just after they started. The monitoring officer's investigation report into the complaint concluded that whilst there had been staffing issues, your comment was inaccurate and exaggerated and could reasonably be regarded as giving an inaccurate impression of the council and the relevant team, which may have inadvertently undermined the recruitment process by diminishing a potential applicant's confidence in applying for the post and harmed the reputation of the authority. At the hearing, the local hearing panel also found that you had breached paragraph 5 of the Code of Conduct for Councillors. The breach was considered to be significant, and the local hearing panel felt that you be publicly censured at this full council meeting and your rights to general information be withdrawn, such that you will only be entitled to be provided with information specific to your role as councillor. Members' actions and behaviour are subject to greater scrutiny than that of ordinary members of the public, and as a member you should have been aware that such comments were disingenuous and were at odds with your view of the need to resource work on the borough plan. I am therefore formally censuring you for your actions and the harm that they may have done to both yours and the council's reputation. This censure will be minuted and kept on public record indefinitely.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Condical, can't bring you in. It's Councillor well, I'll explain if you like. Councillor Condical, you can put your hand down. It's purely a statement by the Managing Director. There is no right of reply from you. Thank you. Which takes us on to item number 8, public participation. We have notification of two questions from members of the public. If I can ask the first person, Jessica Tomlinson, to ask her a question, please.
Hi. I'd like to ask the Council for their thoughts on the proposals to redesign services for children aged 0 to 5, which propose potentially closing down Bedworth Heath, Borkington, Ladybrook, Park Lane, Rainbow and Riversley Park Children's Centres. I, along with nearly 300 others, belong to a support group called Square Peg, which was set up to provide support to families with young children who find themselves caught up in the frankly awful CAM system and end up on never-ending waiting lists, feeling as though they are being judged and dismissed as bad parents. It is a truly heartbreaking place to be, and without Square Peg, I and the rest of the families would be in a much worse place. Square Peg, who are just ordinary parents trying to support each other, have had a tremendous amount of support, advice and guidance from the children's centres. In fact, one of the children's centres earmarked for closure helped them set up an inclusive stay and play group, specially designed for those little ones who have or are awaiting a diagnosis of autism or other special needs. The latest series of sessions were booked out within 7 hours of being released, with a waiting list having to be drawn up, showing exactly what heavy demand there is for such a service. We rely on the help and support of the professionals in the centres to give us guidance on things like health and safety, insurance, signposting to other services such as speech therapy, and the fantastic family support workers who do vital work and whose jobs are under threat of redundancy. For us and all our members, the children's centres are a lifeline, an essential resource that allows us to meet the needs of our children and help them grow into adults who will contribute in a positive way to society as a whole. To us, as the consultation document implies, to seek support on the internet, meet for coffee in a drafty church hall or to hop on a bus to the other side of town to visit a family hub shows that the proposers have no clue what it really means to raise a small child, especially those families coping with a young child with additional needs, or a young mum experiencing postnatal depression, a family without a car, or with two children at different schools. I would like to finish by asking for support for our peaceful protest at Shire Hall on the 18th of July to show the men in suits responsible for making this mockery of a proposal just how unpopular it is.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harvey, do you wish to reply?
Jessica Tomlinson has, I am sure, Mr Mayor, the support of the vast majority of borough councillors present this evening. She and her fellow campaigners certainly have the support of the Labour group. However, I must point out that the measures being proposed and consulted upon are not the responsibility of men in suits, but of the Conservative group controlling the County Council. Of the 36 Tory councillors making the decisions, 11 are women, and the Tory group leader is a woman, Councillor Isabel Seckham. They may try to hide behind council officers, but councillors make decisions on policy, not officers. And the 36 members of the controlling Conservative group at the county can change this policy and stop it going any further. Jessica, you have the full support of all the Labour group here, men and women, in suits, skirts or any other apparel. We are, I hope, not so out of touch as many of the people making such harsh, family-hitting decisions at Shire Hall. And while we cannot at this point vote on our view here this evening, I am sure members who support your campaign and agree with me would be only too happy to stand up now and make this clear. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you. If I can ask Michelle Condacourt to put a question to the council, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There seems to have been a rush of trees being felled in the borough recently. Whilst I'm aware that some will have died and become dangerous, this does not always seem to be the case. A friend asked the men who were felling one on the edge of Riversley Park a few weeks ago why it was being cut down, and was told it was being felled to stop drug users going behind it. If this is true, it is not a sensible solution, as it merely displaces the problem, and eventually we would lose every tree by this way of thinking. How many trees have been felled in the borough in each of the last 3 years? What was the reason noted for the loss of these trees? How many new trees have been planted by the Borough Council in each of the last 3 years? In addition to the loss of trees on council land, we have lost a lot of trees and hedgerows on housing development sites across the borough. What has the council's biodiversity champion been doing to ensure that we do not lose biodiversity, given that these trees and hedgerows are vital for food and shelter for many insects and animals, as well as helping maintain good air quality, reduce flooding, mitigate against climate change, etc.? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Lloyd, do you want to reply?
Mr Mayor, the tree recently removed in Riversley Park was removed due to its poor condition. It had been monitored for some time and had deteriorated to a point where, given the location, if it had fallen, had a potential of cause damage to property or damage to persons. In regard to felling of trees on council-owned land over the last 3 full financial years, 50 trees in 2014-15, there were 60 trees in 2015-16, 110 trees in 16-17. This includes the large-scale removal of popular trees along Stirling Way. To put these figures into context, we have around 120,000 trees in our ownership of varying sizes, and in 2014-15 we started to employ our own tree officer. 30 trees were planted in 2014-15, 25 in 2015-16, and 20 in 16-17, and we intend to plant in excess of 100 trees in this financial year. In regard to the biodiversity, all significant planning applications are required to submit a preliminary ecological appraisal, PEA, and to undertake any detailed protected species survey recommended by the PEA. Measures required following the survey work are conditioned, and all significant applications now undertake a biodiversity impact assessment to determine if there will be a net gain or net loss of biodiversity on the application site. Any net loss is addressed through conditions biodiversity offsetting payments to provide new habitat. Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council and planning officers scrutinise and assess the accuracy of the reports that come to committees. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Lloyd. That takes us then on to item 9, questions by members. You'll note that we have 12 questions to be asked. So if I can ask Councillor Condacourt to ask his question, please.
Portfolio holder for Arts and Leisure. It seems yet again the Glendale grounds maintenance contract is failing to provide an acceptable service everywhere except for the parks in Bedworth. The grass cutting at our housing sites is now done just once a month, and the paths across the borough are overgrown. We pay Glendale around £2 million a year. When they fail to provide an acceptable service, we can eventually issue a rectification notice for the problems. And the final sanction, it seems, is a default notice and a tiny fine. In the first 3 months of this financial year, how many rectification and default notices has the council issued to Glendale? And given the continued performance issues, will the council consider abandoning the proposed uncontested contract extension? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lloyd.
Well, firstly, let me say, and this will probably, Councillor Condacourt, be a first, for me anyway. I agree with Councillor Condacourt. The Glendale grounds maintenance has been absolutely appalling from the start of the grass cutting season. And I can only apologise for that. When I arrived back with my wife from holiday and drove down the Treble 4, we came off the slip road in Bedworth. And you talk about parks in Bedworth, the park opposite there was a total disgrace. So that weekend, I have personally, along with Councillor Jackson, started to tour the borough and register our complaints. We registered some 37 complaints in one weekend. And I'm not finished yet, I'm still continuing. Glendale have now started to pull the socks up. They're pulling all the stops out, and the borough green spaces are improving. Still not there, but they are improving. We have a way to go to maintain the standard that we require. Officers are continually monitoring the contract areas, but with ever-increasing workloads being put on officers due to government cuts, I have to ask all councillors to play their part. If you have a specific issue or complaint, please contact customer services and register the issue. Also, contact the officers direct. If you are a member of the public, please contact Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council's customer services by phone or email, and if the latter, please try and send a photograph. And the issue will be fully investigated and action will be taken if the contractor is found to be failing. The grass cutting regimes in both Nuneaton and Bedworth are exactly the same. No prescribed difference as far as the contracts are concerned. As you have indicated, if the contractor is failing to deliver, then officers will serve rectification notices, which itemise those areas of failure and give a time frame for it being put right, up to an acceptable standard. A default is then issued if the rectification notice is not completed in the given timescale. In the last 3 months of this year, April to June, there have been 52 rectification notices and 6 defaults issued. Each default has a financial penalty of £600. So we have received £3,600 over that period. And over the last 12 months, period 16 to 17, officers have issued 125 rectification notices. The full breakdown of month by month is fully reported at the Planning and Environment and Scrutiny Committee in April and November of each year, which Glendale representatives do attend. Just to clarify, the total value of the two contracts are 1.45 million, not 2 million, as stated. The contact period where it was extended in line with the current procurement legislation. The agreement with Glendale is to hold their prices at April 2011 level for the remainder of the extension period, stopping any further inflationary increase to the contract value. As a council, we do value issues raised by councillors or the public, but officers can only deal with those issues if they are told about them. So again, can I ask councillors to make sure that issues are phoned or emailed to customer services and the relevant officer? Send photos if you can, and if you should be given a reference number that you can keep track of those issues. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Could I ask Councillor Tracy Shepherd to ask her a question?
For the portfolio holder of Health and Environment, could I please ask for an update on the STP? Thank you.
Sorry.
I forgot my name then.
I've forgotten everybody's name tonight.
I would dearly love to be able to give a concise and far-reaching update on the STP. Unfortunately, I can't. It came in with a bang last December. This council met on the 11th of January and came up with a policy and 5 recommendations. Since then, virtually nothing has come out from the NHS regarding the Sustainable Transformation Plan, which I understand has changed its name. It could be the Sustainable Transformation Programme, or it could be something else. Nobody's quite sure, but we're working on that to find out what it's going to be called. So when they're in problems, you just change your name. I'm not suggesting that we do that, of course. The issues that each area was asked to look at was how can we close the health and well-being gap? How will we drive transformation to close the care and quality gap? How will we close the financial and efficiency gap? And we've been asking those questions and wanting answers all the time. We get more information probably from the Warwickshire North Health and Wellbeing Partnership, which is ourselves and North Warwickshire, than we do from the Health and Wellbeing Board. And that's where the NHS is and where NHS England is. And you get nothing. You ask questions and you're told it doesn't say that in the STP, but they don't tell you what it does say. So we're left in limbo, basically. And since January, we've been using our best efforts to engage the NHS to find out more of what the plans are, further details that have not been shared. The council has raised the lack of visibility and poor communication issues associated with the NHS with the Warwickshire Health and Wellbeing Board, and this is an issue that's reflected across the whole county, not just here. It's probably across the country as well, from some of the contacts I've had. And the Warwickshire Health and Wellbeing Board is considering this on the 26th of July, after which we hope more visible and comprehensive overview can be given. So I have no specifics at this point in time. We do know things are going on because you find out by the back door, such as there have been a number of women interviewed, pre- and postnatal. We understand it was 49 in this area. There's supposed to be 700 across the footprint. But again, every time you ask a question, they have no details to tell you. Can't even find out what questions those women were asked. And you'll have seen, I'm sure, in the press or in other publications that you've got, that stroke services will be centralised on UHCW, and the stroke unit at the George Eliot will hopefully, or possibly, become a rehabilitation unit. So anybody suffering a stroke will be taken off to Walsgrave. When they've been treated, they'll be treated locally in the local hospital. Again, we had no prior knowledge of this happening, although it did say it in the STP. So it looks like they were sweeping up some issues that they wanted dealt with some years ago through the acute service review, and didn't get that, so they swept them up and put them into the STP, so they got an excuse for doing them. But it's been done really without any prior knowledge of anybody other than the health service, and people are being asked to contribute to the consultation. It's a bit unfortunate that wasn't pre-decision time. That decision, I can assure you, has been made, and irrespective of what anybody says in the consultation document, it will go ahead. That will be on the agenda, I would suspect, on the 26th as well. The other thing that may or may not impact upon the STP and what we're having is the Naylor report. Prior to and during the election, the Naylor report came out, which basically says, well, all the NHS properties have been subjected to a 3.5% tax each year. The Naylor report suggests anybody not complying with their reasonable demands to sell off property, NHS property, at a knockdown price, that would go up. It also says in the Naylor report that anybody not complying will not get any money for capital projects. So there'll be no more for anybody, any trust not complying will not get any more scanners, X-ray machines, even beds, possibly even sheets. Anything that's capitalised will not go ahead. I'm not sure how that's going to link into the STP, but it's going to link in somewhere along the line because that's what they want to do. And a new organisation has been set up called NHS Properties who is going to manage all this. Now, I don't know if it's gone away because it's very ambiguous in the Queen's speech. So it may still be there or it may not. So just a pre-warning that we could be facing other things associated with the STP. I'm sorry, I couldn't give you more.
Okay. Councillor Guttridge, would you like to ask your question, please?
Supplementary questions tonight.
I'm not Councillor Guttridge.
Thank you. Could the Cabinet Member for Central Services please tell me whether we are fully relocated from St Mary's Road to the new Gresham Road, and is it fully operational, vans in and out? As I was told at the full council meeting on Wednesday the 26th of April 2017 that work would be completed by the end of June. And what was the total cost of the new developments so far? Thank you.
Wish to reply to that?
Before I answer the main part of the question, a question from a member about the capacity of the Gresham Road site to hold vehicles was answered on the 26th of April. However, the programme to bring our new depot into use has always been substantially the same since our main contractor was appointed. This was alluded to in a press release in December and at full council, again in response to a question from a member in February. Apart from a few snagging and finishing works, and despite the non-responsiveness of National Grid to requests to disconnect and then reconnect the gas supply to the site, the works covered by the contract with Ash Construction at the Council's new depot at Gresham Road have been completed on time. 1.84 million has been paid to Ash Construction. As planned, NBBC are now undertaking works to get the site ready for operational use. These works include moving vehicle maintenance equipment and later a weighbridge from St Mary's Road to the new site. Setting up and testing the Wi-Fi system, all the cabling and stuff is already in. Moving existing office furniture from the Council House and St Mary's Road depot to site and installing storage cages and racking. Employees will move from St Mary's Road to Gresham Road from next week. For practical purposes, we will have vacated St Mary's Road by the end of next month, ready for the purchasers to move in. Details of required site remediation are being audited, but we expect a significant capital receipt. With the cooperation of the Mayor, the civic opening of our new depot will take place in the autumn. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Beaumont, if you'd like to ask your question.
Question for Council Leader, Councillor Dennis Harvey. 10 years ago in Bolkington, I can remember young children and youths causing social unrest and graffiti-damaged buildings. The local youth centre was burned to the ground. None of this is now evident in the community today. Bolkington is policed by a light-touch CPSO presence. Recently, an officer was prepared to say at a public forum, Bolkington is a good place to live compared with many others in Nuneaton and Bedworth. Why is this? Because around this time, 10 years ago, we began to form Bolkington Children's Centre, and in the next 5 years set out to improve family life in our village and the wider areas. We rescued our local Woodlands Day nursery from financial collapse, and by financial intervention maintained our Jack and Jill preschool through a difficult transition into a sustainable future. They still provide valued services today. We grew into Bolkington Village Centre, and by using grants from Warwickshire County Council, expanded our capacity from an office and a corridor into a training room and air-conditioned conservatory. We expanded our storage capacity and took over a former police office to support 2 to 3 family support workers. We appointed a deputy manager and delivered outreach support to Bramcote Barracks, including Nepalese families, and established strong links with Wolverine Primary School, which, it should be noted, 50 children from the local traveller community attend. We took on a small wooded area in Bolkington Village Centre and began a forest school to add a new dimension to the 0 to 5 experience. We provided a centre open for 5.5 days a week with a full range of children's services covering health, education and specialist support. We worked to a full set of national standards, and after 5 years were Ofsted inspected and awarded a rating of good. Through all this time, we were well supported by government ring-fence grants. In the past 3 to 4 years, our Children's Centre has suffered financial reductions through the coalition years and competitive tendering through the Conservative years, leading to transfer into a proposed Bolkington Group Children's Centre managed by Bernardo's on a budget 50% reduced from our peak activity. The Warwickshire County Council is now putting the remains of that with a further reduction of finances into a combined family hub and spoke setting with a remit of 0 to 18 years and for send adults up to 25 years old. Does the leader agree with me that improvements that took 5 years to build will be declining to the neglect of the past, and join me in condemning this final act of vandalism?
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
I do agree with Councillor Centres, and I think I made clear the Labour group's opposition when answering the question from Jessica Tomlinson earlier. And I was pleased, Mr Mayor, to see that we had support from the Green Party when I asked people to stand to those closures. Volunteers amongst Bolkington residents have indeed done wonders in the village in recent years, Mr Mayor, but this is a step too far. Professional help is needed to run children's centres. They can't just be run by volunteers, and these closures must not be allowed to happen. Yes, Mr Mayor, the whole community needs to come together to support Councillor Beaumont and Jessica Tomlinson and all the people who are involved in trying to stop the closure of children's centres.
Councillor Smith, if you'd like to ask your question, please.
My question is for the portfolio holder for health and environment. Can the portfolio holder explain why residents on the new housing development at the old Bramcote Hospital site are not receiving a recycling and green bin service, and when they might expect to receive this essential service that they're paying for? Can he also confirm if the council has a rural bin collection policy, and if so, where I and residents can find details?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given the relatively small number of originally occupied houses, the council started collecting from the properties on this new development a few months using the smaller refuse collection vehicle that undertakes collections for our more rural, in inverted commas, because we don't really have that much you can class as rural in this authority. We have currently issued the properties with 2 black bins to give them the same overall capacity to dispose of household waste as the same as a borough, other people in the borough. The smaller refuse vehicle is able to cross the bridge on the Lutterworth Road, which has an 18-tonne gross vehicle weight limit on it, which puts some limitations on it. And we get in and out of the development relatively easy, given the number of building contractors' vehicles that are currently on site on a daily basis. However, once the development is completed and fully occupied, and the building contractors' vehicles have left site, we will put the properties onto the standard refuse collection route, remove the second black bin, and then give them the full complement of bins. To do this, we will need to change their collection day to a Thursday, which we will advise them of that change in good time, so it gives them time to adjust whatever they're throwing away. The council does not have a separate policy for a formal rural bin collection.
Councillor Copeland, I'd like to ask you a question, please.
I'm concerned to see that Warwickshire Police and Crime Commissioner Philip Seckham is seeking to appoint Councillor Robert Tromans, Deputy Leader of the Conservative opposition at this council, as his deputy. When Philip Seckham was elected as Commissioner, he subsequently resigned his position as a councillor at Stratford-upon-Avon District Council, and that was to concentrate on his new duties and avoid political influence. Does the leader share my concern that such an appointment clearly clashes with Councillor Troman's position as a councillor on this authority, as the Deputy Commissioner should, like the Commissioner himself, be above party politics in that role?
You. Councillor Harvey, if you could reply, please.
Mr Mayor, members may well be aware that I was chair of Warwickshire Police and Crime Panel when the position of Commissioner was first established. Commissioners don't have to have a Deputy Commissioner. Whilst the first elected Commissioner, Ron Ball, took up office, when he first took up office, he made sure that any former political allegiances that he had played no part in his new role. And he appointed Eric Wood, former Acting Chief Exec of Warwickshire County Council and Chief Executive of the former Police Authority, as his deputy. Neither Ron nor Eric showed any party political allegiances during their time in office, and we all felt fairly treated throughout the county. The new Commissioner, Philip Seckham, was actually a Conservative councillor at Stratford when first elected, but quickly relinquished that role. In doing so, he made sure residents could see that he would aim to be impartial in carrying out his role, despite the fact that his wife is Conservative leader of the County Council. However, I am quite honestly shocked that another serving Conservative councillor has been selected to be his deputy, particularly as he, that is Philip Seckham, stated that he wanted to appoint somebody completely different from himself. Is geographical location of home base the only marker here then? Councillor Tromans serves as a prominent member of the Conservative opposition at this council. He may not be deputy leader now, Chair, because I see they've changed seats. He makes his opposition to many of the council's policies clear, some of which are directly related to crime and security in our borough. How then can he continue to stay in this role as a councillor if this council is to have straightforward dealings with him as it did with the previous Deputy Commissioner? So yes, Councillor Copeland, I think your question deals with a clear case of conflict of interest, and I trust Councillor Tromans will be doing the right thing and immediately offering his resignation as a borough councillor if his position at the PCC's office is confirmed by the police and crime panel.
Which were approved not too long ago. The Constitution allows us to actually move a motion on a question which has been asked and the subsequent reply. I would like to move a motion, Mr Mayor, that this council regrets the leader of the council's rank hypocrisy in the terms of the answer he has just given and asks him to apologise.
You'll understand, I think, that I need to seek clarification on this. Just give us a moment, please. My understanding was it's purely a question and an answer and not something that's debated.
Mr Mayor. This is the may request to move a motion in connection with response and consideration of a seconded speaker on that. The rules of debate apply as they would normally. It's limited to no more than 15 minutes, and each member shall be limited to speaking no more than 3 minutes, so they're all 3 minutes. So Councillor Wilson's correct.
It's allowed. It's 15 minutes and 3.
It's Councillor Wilson. Was it seconded?
It was. I think there was a few. Okay, Councillor Wilson. Yeah, you're quite.
We need the motion.
Yeah, you're quite right in what you've said. If you're moving the motion, then we need the exact wording of that motion again, please.
The reply just given by the leader of the council, Councillor Harvey, this council regrets the rank hypocrisy submitted by Councillor Harvey's answer and requests that he apologise to Councillor Tromans.
Is that seconded?
Reserve your right to speak.
Okay, thank you. Just to remind members that... is there something else you wanted, Kate? I just want to remind members on this... You're happy that that's acceptable, Philip, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If I can just remind members, the Constitution on motions such as this only allows for 15 minutes debate, and there's a time limit of 3 minutes when a member speaks. Is that correct as well, Philip?
Yes,
yeah?
that's correct.
That would, okay. Any member? Councillor Harvey.
Well, little dictionary, the word hypocrisy. Hypocrisy means if you accuse somebody of doing something that you are doing yourself. I have not ever had a paid position with the Police and Crime Commissioner's office. I have stated facts. I was appointed as chair to the role of chair of the Police and Crime Panel by the representatives of the Warwickshire Councils, District and County, where I was elected to the position. It was a non-paid position. I never received any allowance for doing that job, Mr Mayor. I have stated the position. Councillor Tromans is being appointed to a paid position at the Police and Crime Commissioner's office. The role of the Police and Crime Panel was in fact to hold the Police and Crime Commissioner to account. Often the public don't understand, but I would have expected councillors to understand that position, Mr Mayor, and I thoroughly object to being called a hypocrite.
Harvey certainly has a short memory, because the person sat to his side did exactly the same thing, Councillor Jackson. Back in 2016, she stood for the position of Police and Crime Commissioner. That's her right. She also stood for the position on the exact same day to be a borough councillor. So, if we follow the logic through, she was elected for the member for Wenbrook, which I congratulate her for. She would have been in the position, had she won, which fortunately she didn't, the Police and Crime Commissioner election. If you follow Councillor Harvey's logic, Councillor Jackson would have had to resign the very next same day she'd just been elected. Now, that is exact rank hypocrisy, because you would cause a by-election knowing that you were going into an election for Police and Crime Commissioner and for borough election. You were duping the residents of this borough, because you would have ended up causing another by-election and more costs, which you keep complaining that this council can ill afford. So that is hypocrisy, Councillor Harvey, pure and simple. Now, whether we like it or not, we all have our different views on Police and Crime Commissioners when they came in, but they're here to stay. They were elected as party political members when they were. Ron Ball happened to be independent. The residents of Warwickshire elected a Conservative. It is down to a Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner who he chooses as a Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, whether they be political or non-political. But let's not kid ourselves that politics is in the police service at every single level, from our level all the way up to government. And that means that he is well within his rights to stay. And if the residents of St Nicholas, if Councillor Tromans, and I hope he will resubmit next year, takes on the role, that they will see that they have a hard, strong, fighting member in St Nicholas, fighting not only for his residents here in the chamber, but also for the residents of Nuneaton in the police as well. I don't abide at all with the hypocrisy that Councillor Harvey has just given, allowing his own members to say as he does and not do what they want and then not as he says. That is hypocrisy, Mr Mayor, and I expect an apology.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Copeland asked me a question. I answered. That did not involve Councillor Jackson. I answered the question, I explained the situation, and of course, Mr Mayor, in similar circumstances, had Councillor Jackson won, I would have expected the same of Councillor Jackson. But I have been accused of being a hypocrite, and then you have the cheek to to ask me to submit an apology. I thought things had got pretty bad in this council chamber, Mr Mayor. It's just hit the gutter.
As the worst behaved councillor in this chamber, it seemed very strange for me
Could
to
you
come in.
just give me a moment, Councillor? Could I just ask all councillors, like I have done in the past, I know it's touched a nerve, but let's be respectful while the councillor's trying to speak. Let's not interrupt him. Councillor Condicourt.
Just a point, Mr Mayor, because Councillor Wilson has spoke, then he won't be able to move to the vote now, because that was the right of reply.
Right,
okay. You can't speak twice on the item, so we should move to the vote.
Right, Councillor Condicourt, if you can switch your mic off, please. Councillor Wilson, I should have known really, but because Councillor Wilson moved the motion, he had the right of reply, which is just done by speaking again, which then means that we have to move straight on to the vote. So, I'm sorry for those list of speakers. I'm taking the advice that I've been given from the legal person, because I'd be foolish not to. So I'm going to move to the vote. I'm going to make sure everybody's absolutely clear on what's been moved and seconded, and then we'll move to the vote. So could we have the motion read out, please, if we've got the correct words for it? Or if you... Yeah, have you got them written down, Councillor Wilson?
I know, because I didn't know the question was going to be coming tonight.
Well, yeah. Well, you moved it. We need to know what it is.
The wording of the motion was that this council regrets the hypocrisy of Councillor Harvey in his recent reply and requests that he give an apology to Councillor Tromans. And I'd like to request a recorded vote, please.
Okay, and it was seconded by Councillor Brindley. So in that case, we'll move to a recorded vote.
Councillor Gordon.
Oh, I do apologise, yeah. I keep getting all the family wrong this week, I'm sorry. No, I had a daughter in the parlour from a school visit yesterday, and I've got to say, her daughter was very proud of her mother's role in the council.
Thank you,
right,
Mr.
we'll move
Moore.
to the vote.
I will read out the name of each member, who will then indicate if they are for or against the motion. Councillor Aldington.
Against.
Councillor Beaumont.
Against.
Councillor Bennett. Councillor Bonner.
Against.
Councillor Brindley. Councillor Copland.
Against.
Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doughty apologies. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Gizane.
For.
Councillor Glass.
Against.
Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge.
For.
Councillor Hancocks.
Against.
Councillor Harvey.
Against.
Councillor Haynes.
Against.
Councillor Jackson. Councillor Kondarka.
I want to now speak, so I'm not voting.
Abstain. Councillor Tony Lloyd absent. Councillor Ian Lloyd.
I'm not going to allow to speak, but I am going to vote against.
Councillor Longden.
Against.
Councillor Margrave.
Against.
Councillor Caroline Phillips. Councillor Neil Phillips.
Against.
Councillor Pomfret. Glyn Pomfret.
Against.
Councillor Margaret Pomfret. Councillor Jill Shepherd. Councillor Tracy Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Apologies. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Watkins.
Against.
And Councillor Wilson.
The motion's lost. We can move on to item number 9. Councillor Tromans, could you ask your question, please?
Oh.
Have I missed one? Oh, yeah. Yeah. What? Councillor Brindley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Given that there is a current planning application which is outside of the preferred options within the borough plan, will the portfolio holder give assurances to the residents of St Nicholas that should this application be granted, an equal number of houses will be removed from the allocation for St Nicholas in the borough plan?
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I didn't pick this up before and I should have done. How is this going to affect members on the planning committee? It's only a question. Sorry?
No, the question's been asked to Councillor Aldington.
Officers are aware that developers are carrying out some pre-submission consultation on a proposed development on land at Poplars Farm, the Longshoot. A planning application has not yet been submitted, and if one is submitted, all of the normal consultations will be carried out before a report is considered by the Planning Applications Committee in due course. As Councillor Brindley will know, the Borough Plan has already been submitted to the Planning Inspectorate for examination. Any significant changes in planning permissions granted for housing will be reported to the Inspector, and it will be for the Inspector to decide how they will be dealt with. It should be expected that his first, and it is a he by the way, his first consideration will be to see any planning permissions for housing on unallocated land as contributing towards the current shortfall in housing numbers, giving consideration to deallocating sites.
Okay, thank you. London, please.
Thank you, fellow holder for health and environment. Refuse collection is one of the few universal services that directly affects all residents that this council serves. Moreover, residents also pay for this service through their council tax. Over the past few weeks, we have seen persistent problems in the collection of refuse by this council, and many residents are frustrated and annoyed at the lack of service by this council. Could the portfolio holder please explain how the council has gotten into this mess and what steps he is taking to ensure that residents get the full refuse service that they pay for? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor London.
Can I thank Councillor Wilson for his question? It's not going to happen very often. But it gives me the opportunity to stand up here and give a verbal apology to people who were affected or adversely affected by not having their bins collected. Normally, the refuse collection and green waste collection service we provide to our residents is exceptionally high. and we get very high satisfaction levels from our residents for these services. However, for a period of 8 days, over 2 weeks in late June and early July, we encountered short-term staffing difficulties with HGV drivers that led to some properties in the borough, by which I mean 10 to 15 streets each day not having their wheel bins emptied on their normal collection days. This means, of course, that the vast majority of residents did have their bins collected on their normal day in the normal way. And I'd like to place on record our thanks to the staff for making sure that people got their bins collected, albeit perhaps a day or maybe 2 days late. When I read this question about how many residents, what did you say, substantial number of residents, I checked on the complaints sheets. There were 2 formal complaints, and those 2 were linked to the fact that those people didn't have the bins collected on the day that they were told they were getting collected, which is fair, and apologies have been issued for that. There were telephone calls, and in the main, people accepted the problem and the assurance that their bin would be collected. So, far from masses of residents being upset by this across the 10 to 15 streets that were affected, really, that's saying it's not quite true. It's not factual in that respect. In almost every case, we were able to empty the wheel bins that were not emptied on their normal day, which meant that the inconvenience to our residents, although regrettable, was minimised. And all of their refuse or green waste in the wheel bins were taken away. Residents who contact the council to find out why their bin had not been emptied on a normal day were generally happy with the explanation, as I've just said. I've liaised closely with the officers in the refuse and cleansing team to take measures, including training up existing waste management operatives to be able to drive the vehicles, which you need an HGV Class C licence for. And there are restrictions with that as well, of course, because they've all got tachographs. So a driver can only travel for so long before having to have a break and then get back onto it. They can only do so many hours in a day and so many hours in a week. Now, if somebody asked me to break the law on that, just to get bins emptied, if we've got a problem, then I'm not going to guarantee that. We're not going to break the law. We're going to stick to the law, and we are going to try and get HGV drivers from within our own resources. That's not always easy. 2 people have passed their theory tests already. I'm not quite sure when they're having the test, but when they get the test, hopefully those 2 will be able to fill in when we've got gaps. And what happened was we had 2 drivers on holiday and 2 went sick. And you can't legislate for that, and that's what happened. And that caused the problems. And we also had a problem with one of the vehicles, and you can't legislate for that. So we will try to do our best to get cover. It's not like the good old days when you could put in flexibility and some contingencies because, of course, we are suffering now from austerity. And the flexibility that we had, we've had to cut back on and cut back on and cut back on. So whilst I would love to stand here and give a cast iron guarantee that this will not happen again, I can't, because it might. The circumstances that led up to this were unique, and it may well be that we get a recurrence at some time in the future. Hopefully not. Hopefully we'll be able to cover it. We also got options with the road cleansing vehicles and the mechanics who we might be able to use. But of course, as soon as you take people off those duties start to get neglected as well. So the roads won't get swept, and the mechanics won't be servicing the vehicles, and so there might be other problems. So it's all a balancing act at the moment. The true thing is we need to get, or the government needs to lift austerity. It needs to take away from all these things that they're doing with the councils across the country, not just us, and cutting their budgets to the bone. And this is what's happening now. And if members across there have got any influence at all, please use it to get us out of these problems. Because at the moment, we will do it, and we will keep the service, and I think we'll keep our accreditation with the public as excellent. So that's the plan, but there's no guarantees, not in this time of life anyway.
If you could ask your question, please.
We've got lots of Section 106 money, so that's not affected by austerity, so that can't be the answer to this
question. Can you ask your question, please, Councillor?
With the ongoing traveller incursions in the area, can the portfolio holder give local residences assurance that Tiverton and other play parks in the borough have been fully secured against unauthorised vehicular access?
The problem that we have with travellers, the problems that we have with travellers are and have been associated with many sites with numerous incursions across the borough for a number of years, as you're fully aware. This has resulted in undertaking a number of target hardening options at considerable cost to this council across many sites, including the addition of height barriers, metal fencing, wooden fencing, concrete blocks, gates, bollards, ditches and bunds. This includes Tiverton and Tavistock, which have seen the installation of measures over the last 12 months. Unfortunately, these only act as a deterrent and not a solution. Many of the sites have been the subject of further incursions with the breaking and removing of locks, fences, gates. We even welded one gate shut and put a bottle bank in front of it. They cut the weld and removed the back bottle bank. This has resulted in tense situations developing with the police actually insisting we let travellers onto sites as there was a potential issue that could occur. Now, being a hard-standing member across there, Councillor, now you're going to be the Deputy Crime Commissioner, surely the buck will not stop with you, as you can use Section 61 and move the travellers on straight away, saving the council money, time and the public a lot of heartache. Myself and the people of this borough look forward to you turning words into action, not just in your area, but right across this borough. We have to look at the whole borough and take steps as best we can within the budget and the law. As you will know, the council have undertaken a review which resulted in special scrutiny panel meeting of the Planning and Environmental Scrutiny Panel. This was attended by the police, a number of representatives from the County Council, as well as borough officers who gave evidence to the panel. A report was presented to the panel identifying the issues of unauthorised access, outlining the approach that was undertaken by Parks and Countryside in relation to the unauthorised encampments. The Council has also made representations to our 3 local MPs, relevant government department outlining suggestions of legal changes we require. Gavin Barwell, MP Minister of State for Housing and Planning, responded to the Council's letter saying they'll keep the matter under review. Basically, there's no suggestion the government will take any action to strengthen our legal powers to deal with the travellers. They've basically kicked it into the long grass. And with reference to our local MPs, well, that fell on deaf ears. We desperately need a change in the law. This is the only way for us to, as an authority, all countrywide authorities, to deal with the problem effectively. So I hope if anybody across there has any influence with their MPs or with the Minister for State of Housing and Planning, they'll support us and they'll push for those ideas and those legal changes that we've asked for at that government level. But I won't hold my breath, Mr. Mayor. Given the recent levels of resident dissatisfaction with grass cutting not being done, litter not being picked up concurrently, and the general state of the grounds maintenance being performed, could the portfolio holder tell us, firstly, how many rectification notices has been issued in the last 12 months, how many default notices have been issued in the last 12 months, and how much has been recovered in financial penalties under the grounds maintenance contract in the last 12 months?
Repeat your earlier answer.
No, I'm not going with the previous question from Councillor Condor, and I will add again. I encourage councillors like Councillor Gran to actually email in and complain, because we're not getting the complaints coming in from councillors, so we need those complaints coming in from councillors as well as the members of the public. Thank you.
Councillor Glass, would you like to ask your question, please?
Could the leader further elaborate on the business meeting which was recently held at Nuneaton Golf Club? The fact that the Mayor of the Combined Authority, Andy Street, attended gives further credence that this Borough Council was correct to embrace the new authority, while the rest of Tory-controlled Warwickshire fought against it.
It was an enormous success. In fact, I believe that it was sold out, so to speak, but except people didn't have to pay. We had some excellent speakers, including from Myra and from Holland and Barrett, who've got their international headquarters, which is just being expanded, opening soon in Nuneaton and Bedworth. Andy Street, the Mayor of the West Midlands, which doesn't include this area, but we're connected with them economically, also commended this area to businesses and didn't introduce any party politics, Mr Mayor. We're on different sides of the political fence. It was an enormous success, the meeting, and we hope to have follow-up meetings of a similar nature, Mr Mayor. I think our association with the West Midlands Combined Authority, we were the first non-constituent to sign up. Of course, several have followed, including the people who vehemently opposed our move at the County Council. We now have the leader of the County Council sitting there as part of the West Midlands Executive. So, but I am waiting for an apology from there, Mr Mayor, to say, I was wrong. I'm talking about the leader of the County Council. I was wrong, and Nuneaton and Bedworth were right.
Councillor Bonner, if you'd like to...
I've got a question for the portfolio holder for planning and development. My question is with regard to motor traffic congestion and its associated effects upon obesity levels, air quality and the general well-being of our residents. What are we, please note the we, it's not really a political question, what are we, in the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, doing to encourage effective modal change to more walking and cycling and less reliance on the private motor car in our borough? I know what we're not doing. We're not maintaining our paths, especially our shared use walking and cycling paths, in a manner to encourage more walking and cycling. At a recent council meeting, we were told that in the region of £450,000 had been spent upgrading a shared use cycling and walking path, which links Nuneaton with the Motor Industries Research Association site, MIRA. This will be a total waste of money unless the path is maintained to a reasonable standard. I say this because there are two similar shared use paths in our borough, two that I use quite often. There's the Wembrook Way, which links our town centre, more or less in front of this building, through Paulsland, well, towards Paulsland and Magyar Crescent in Whitestone. The other one connects the Gadby Street, Lister, William Street area through Attleborough Fields Industrial Estate to the Eastborough Way. These two examples are paths built to very good standards. They're excellent. They're 3 metres wide, they're concrete edged, smooth tarmac, and they've got street lighting in places. Both are not being very well maintained at present. In fact, they're a liability. There's litter, natural, from the vegetation, and man-made. There's overgrown shrubs, low overhanging trees, which makes these paths precarious and in places dangerous to use. I understand some of the maintenance issues are the responsibility of Warwickshire County Council. I've been in touch with them as well. But we should be working with Warwickshire County Council to maintain all of our paths, especially the paths which link our housing areas, excuse the spelling mistake, with our schools, employment areas and other amenities. Paths that can be used for practical commuting. The building of new roads and the development of existing roads will not ease motor congestion. There's too many cars on the road, there's too many cars in ownership. So what are we, I emphasise that again, we, the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, going to do to improve the maintenance of our paths, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor.
The Borough Plan includes policies to develop and improve walking and cycling routes, and where these are relating to development monies to do this, along with maintenance monies, are included in the negotiations for Section 106 agreements. Specific schemes are included in the policies for each development site. Where new facilities are part of the public highway, monies are passed on to the County Council. We also promote the use of our pathways and cycleways in relation to improving the health of our residents. When monies are secured for works as part of legal agreements, they do include monies for maintenance. The footpath that Councillor Bonner mentioned, whilst it is within our borough to link to Myra, was secured as part of the development of the Myra site in Hinckley and Bosworth's administrative area. Other footpath and cycleways will be maintained as part of our normal maintenance of parks and open spaces.
That completes the question and answer session. If we can move on to item number 10, special urgency decisions. There's been no special urgent decisions taken, so we note that. Agree? Item number 11 is the appointment of independent persons. In the absence of Councillor Tandy, can I, from the chair, move that the persons listed in Appendix A, with the addition of Mr. Howard Darling, be approved? Oh, right. It's been moved and seconded. Councillor Condacore.
This item, as
Councillor Condacore, can you just wait one moment? Called you. It means that you're allowed to speak. I don't see any need just to make petty remarks. Just say what you need to say.
To the council's, it's effectively a panel, are really important because they sit there for when there's issues about behaviour and all sorts of issues about getting rid of officers and things. They're a really important part of the council's checks and balances. And I think we do actually need to make sure they are independent and also make sure they understand how councils work and what goes on. So I think it would be marvellous if we are appointing these independent people to a panel for them to actually sit here, understand the tensions of a council, and when we do get complaints sent to them, because they are the first people who receive a complaint. So if Councillor A complains about Councillor B, or a member of the public complains about a councillor, the first thing that happens is the independent person will actually get a copy of the complaint as set out by our officers. And they only get the information from our officers and from the complainant. They don't get the information from the person complained about. So I really do think we need them to understand how the council works, the banter and whatever. And actually, I'm always in front of the standards panel for various reasons. I'm never allowed to reply when I'm being censured. And I really get upset because I'm actually one of the most polite and well-behaved in this auditorium. And I do think we should have the independent members here to observe a meeting before they're appointed. Also, going down the list, I do note how much they've got quite sort of OBE this, and the extra one here is actually a parish councillor. So they're not just random people, yeah, they are people who have part of the establishment. And I do think it'd be useful to invite them to a council meeting before they're appointed.
Councillor Harvey.
For Councillor Condock, who has just had a second, to my knowledge, censure read out in here about how councils work and the banter amongst councillors. Yes, many of us have been councillors for years and we have had a little bit of banter. But there is a limit to the way You behave, Mr Mayor. There's a limit to the way you behave towards other councillors. There's a limit to the way you behave towards officers who are merely doing their job. And there's a limit to the way you behave towards members of the public. It is totally insulting for Councillor Kondaka to decry these people, and I don't know one single person here, not one I think, I mean one of them may tell me they know me, but I don't know any of these people, because they're independents. And these are the people who are sitting on panels. There is always somebody who's an independent person. Quite rightly so, Mr Mayor. So we have tried as a council to include people who are independent so that councillors couldn't stand up and say, I've been picked on in a very childish fashion. These people here are the people who actually are making the judgments. So if Councillor Kondaka has sat here and the County Council for years and doesn't know how to behave himself, perhaps he could actually ask one of those people.
Put this with the independent members. I went on the audit and standards training taken by a very good officer, Mr Philip Richardson. Found it very informative, but I was very saddened that more council members didn't attend. Thank you.
It's perhaps not for me to say, somebody will tell me off, but I'm pretty certain that independent people that come onto the council have to receive some training initially anyway, don't they, within the council. Thought it was going to be quite a simple thing, but I guess people can vote against them if they don't want them to be here. It's been moved and seconded that we appoint those independent persons that are listed with the addition of Mr Howard Darling. All those in favour? And against? And abstentions? You don't need to wave to me. Okay, that's carried. If we can move on then to item number 12, membership of the planning application and a request from Councillor Wilson. Can you move your motion, please, Councillor Wilson?
In circumstances which were not known at the annual council, I would like to move that Councillor Tromans ceases to be a member of the Planning Applications Committee and that I take his place with immediate effect. Thank you, Chair.
That's seconded. Thank you. Getting better, aren't I? Get the name right. Okay.
On this, we've never actually done this before. What we've done is tried to be fair, and the legal people, Richardson, works out a percentage of who can be on what committee and how many people get that many places, and then each group actually decides when they're given the places. So, we've never opposed anybody opposite, but I'm just very interested because Councillor Wilson said that Councillor Troman's situation has changed and therefore is going to come off the planning committee. Councillor Troman's issued a press release to say he's coming off the planning committee because he wants to stand up for against the planning application in St Nicholas Park.
Yeah, well, as it's been put forward as a motion and seconded, yes, we'll be voting on it. Any member? No? In that case, it's been moved that Councillor Wilson, subject to any necessary training, will become the member on Planning Applications Committee to replace Councillor Tromans. All those in favour of that? One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11. And against? And abstentions? First time ever. It's carried. Item number 13 is the Cabinet Stroke Leaders Report, page 41.
Only been, I think, 2 cabinets since in here. And basically, I'm quite happy to, as with other members of the Cabinet, quite happy to answer questions. But I would actually draw out one of the main points, which is the establishing a Nuneaton and Bedworth lottery, Mr Mayor, which I know has been welcomed by several of the local groups in Nuneaton and Bedworth, because it will make it much easier for them to be able to raise funds and mean they don't have to set up something themselves, which is our main reason for doing it. And so, Mr Mayor, I commend the minutes to you.
Okay, thank you. I need somebody to second it, don't I? I've moved one ahead again. I like a snooker player. There's one move ahead. Right, any member? Councillor Wilson. Oh no.
I'd like to ask a question of the housing portfolio holder, Councillor Jackson, in relation to the housing strategy. I fully support the idea of having a housing strategy, even though it is no longer a formal requirement. It makes perfect sense for a local authority to have one, but I am concerned that many of the proposals and articles in the policy are based on the draft borough plan and the information in there. Regardless of the political debates which we may have about the borough plan, I'm concerned that we are formulating a policy on the basis of something which hasn't yet been tried and tested before an inspector. Would the portfolio holder agree that that is a risk with this housing strategy, and will she give an undertaking to perform further work on that housing strategy should the borough plan have some significant changes when it comes back from the inspector, which would impact on the housing strategy that she wants to take forward? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Sets out the needs of our community in terms of housing, and if there are any changes to what is identified as the needs, then of course policies can be adapted to actually take account of that. But this is about housing need. It is a sensible way forward. It is a document that's shared with the public and our communities to try and ensure that we in Nuneaton and Bedworth have the housing, the right type of housing, that actually means we meet housing need. I can't see any one or any rationale for the concerns you expressed, Councillor Wilson.
Please.
I'm actually to Councillor Jackson on a similar point. This housing strategy that went through the Cabinet was based upon the projections that were used to formulate the borough plan, and these projections were based upon the 2012 government population projections. That's 5 years ago, 2012. These projections have been updated several times, and we have a far newer set of population figures.
Can you ask the question, Councillor Condacott?
It's important. The question is, why is the housing strategy based upon 5-year out-of-date housing projections and not the latest ONS objective needs, which were about 6,800 houses for the borough, not 13,375?
Councillor Jackson?
Strategy. It is not the borough plan. It is about housing need in Nuneaton and Bedworth. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Stan.
Yeah, for the general fund outturn and things, where it talks about managing future risks and liabilities, etc. One of the things in there is obviously the climbing wall fiasco and the liabilities in that. Can the portfolio holder tell us if that is being transferred out of the liabilities, and whether, because we're underspent on the climbing wall because we can't staff it, and one of the options is we actually do something with it and get it off the books. So can the portfolio holders tell us what's happening financially with the climbing wall?
Reply to it. Oh, is it? Okay. I don't mind.
That, as I'm sure the independent members and most members of the council will know, that's actually not on page item 13. It's on item 14 because the general fund outturn has to be voted on as a separate item.
Are there any other questions regarding the Cabinet report? No? Right. Which takes us then on to item 14, which is recommendations from the Cabinet or other committees. Councillor Harvey, can I ask you to move the recommendations on the agenda?
I move A first of all then, Mr Mayor.
Is that seconded?
I'll second.
Councillor Condacott.
A lot of concerns about the outturn, starting particularly on page 52, where it talks about the Bedworth Cricket Pavilion. This decision to go ahead with this was rushed through a few years ago, or last financial year, because it had to be done urgently. And the budget for it went from an initial £75,000 to something like £405,000. In this outturn, it says this project was delayed, even though when we voted on it, we couldn't delay it, it had to be an urgent vote. And now I see in the back of this document, when you've carried forward this project, it has now got even more expensive. So there's another £74,000 added to the Bedworth Cricket Club. So it's now a £479,000 project, when it started as a £75,000 project. So that is an area we need some certainty on. The next thing on the outturn, it's got in the General Fund's capital programme, it talks about land at Bermuda. This is obviously the Gresham Road depot. And it's got the £2 million there, of which we spent 1.3 million almost at the end of the financial year. 700,000 to carry over, but obviously there seems to be some strange £800,000 now spending expected. So has it actually overrun by £95,000, or has some money been moved around, or different things going on with that issue? So there are two things on that issue. We also have the outturn was based upon our assumptions for the year, and we went horrendously wrong on parking. So if you look at the variations for the year, the parking income was out by £240,000. That's £250,000 our variance was out. On an entirely predictable reduction of income from parking, with the closure of the co-op well known at the time we set the last budget, and the hike in car parking fees almost certain to actually reduce the number of people using our car parks. So I don't understand why we didn't expect this and why it's an unexpected variance. Also on there, we've got the budget underspend on the borough plan. £81,000 underspent on the borough plan. And yet when we're doing the borough plan consultation, they said there's no money to have more venues, there's no money to send out an in touch in time. The whole consultation was done on a shoestring as badly as possible, and now we found you're underspent by £81,000. Surely you could hire some staff, some extra consultants, hire some rooms and printed a version in touch to make that consultation far more successful. I say there's loads of stuff in here, and the other one I pick up actually on page 57 is the planning enforcement reserve. We do absolutely no planning enforcement in terms of enforcement actions. We're softly with developers, which means that on my patch and in St Nicholas, we have cycle lanes that are incomplete, footpaths that are unwalkable, and the enforcement officers are too timid because this council doesn't stand up to developers. The classic is the Bellway development, where we have a cycle lane and footpath across the Bellway site, ends 10 metres before the hedge. If we actually use some of this planning enforcement reserve to actually do some planning enforcement, we might actually have some joined up footpaths so people could walk from the new developments to the schools. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. It is an outturn of what happened, and so regardless of the political decisions which happened in formulating the budget, I personally can't see a reason to vote against it. I might disagree with how the budget was formulated, but it is a statement of what was spent and how it went. But page 56 is of particular concern, Mr Mayor, and I share a number of Councillor Condacor's concerns. But when we look at the list of variances, and there are some significant variances on there which we have been, from these benches, warning about and flashing signs and doing everything we can to warn the controlling group about for years. With relation to grounds maintenance, reduction in income, I think it's interesting to note, including sports pitches hire. I remember full well standing at this desk at Budget Council when the party opposite wanted to increase the pitch fees by 3%. And I warned then that what you are doing to small Sunday League football clubs who are run by volunteers and activists and enthusiasts who like to go for a kickabout, have a bit of competition, then go down the pub for a couple of pints afterwards, it would have an impact. And we're seeing that. I warned about that, and we are seeing that it is having an impact on our budgets. NABCEL is doing extremely well, which is pleasing to see, and we're working on a very good cross-party basis to see that going forward, and long may that continue, because
It is a non-political entity, and we are doing our best by the residents. But I find it so incredibly hard to believe, Mr. Mayor, that we get our assumptions wrong at the start of the budgetary year. If you look at the reduced car park income of £240,000, we warned about that when the car parking charges were scheduled to be increased. And it's all right saying, oh, we're changing this and that, and you can't compare like for like, but you had to reprofile your base to begin with at the start, so you should have known about this. The changes were taken into account. So, for example, taking the 6 p.m. Changes out, by changing Harefield Road, moving some charges out completely on the outlying areas of the town centres. This was all known about before, yet we are relying, and it is so blatantly obvious in this report, we are relying on the basis of development control and the increase in planning applications and the money that they bring in to compensate for the party opposite's inability to get the car parking charges in this borough correct. So not only are the residents being stung once when they have to go and pay for their car parking in the town centre on a Saturday or a Wednesday on the market days or when they want to come in, but the residents in the areas, particularly Weddington and St Nicholas, are being stung twice, because not only are they having the development in their areas, which is unwanted by local residents and is scheduled to happen to many other communities across this borough, they're being stung yet again by this council because we can't get our sums right and our forecast right at the start, and that is unfair on residents, particularly those who want to support our town centres and particularly those in the affected areas of development. And also we see that domestic refuse and recycling is out of budget by over £250,000. Surely someone should be explaining to this council why that is happening. I can understand a variance of a couple of 10, 20, £30,000, but we're talking eye-watering sums out of the reach of the vast majority of the people of this borough in their lifetime, never mind what this council does. So we need to get smarter and better and fairer with residents of this borough when it comes to our budgeting. And although I will vote for its outturn, I think there are some serious questions that the party opposite needs to answer, not only to resident members of the council here, but more importantly to the residents of the borough who are being hit in their pockets and in their lives. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you indicate, but it's probably because this telly's... Oh, yeah, oh, of course, yeah.
This is in actual fact a summary of the outturn. It's a summary of, I would say, the hard work done by our officers in dealing with very difficult situations in a time of decreasing income. This council has lost 60% of its income in recent years, 60%. I don't know another council that has continued to run its services to the extent that we have. When Councillor Kondaka talks about a hike, I looked it up, but my dictionary is the old traditional one that doesn't have Americanisms in, so it just says a long walk. And we could recommend that, actually, Mr. Mayor. Look at the increase in income from NABCEL. We are having some of the metropolitan city councils coming to ask how we've done so well with NABCEL. And I thank Councillor Wilson, because he does work with us on that small little group, Mr. Mayor. I look at the other things where there has been reduced costs, because we don't just set the budget. Along with the officers, the Cabinet works all year round to look at possible costs, because next year we've another £1.5 million almost to find. People in Whitehall don't live in the real world. So for us to have actually come to such an outturn, Mr. Mayor, I am extremely pleased. And I would say, when we're asking questions, we ask how we've done this, how we've done that. You don't say, well, how have we managed to keep all our services going despite having grants slashed? Because I could say to you, how was it in 2008 when you had no grants slashed to speak of, you closed the play scheme and stopped all toilets in public parks and privatised the parks contract and sold it off to Glendale? Mr. Mayor, let's when we talk about the word hypocrisy, let's get some reality into this. And I'm not talking about Councillor Caldecott because he talks about anything on any item on the agenda. I'm talking about the opposition. Look at when you ran the council for a very short period. You certainly couldn't have managed to do so well.
To the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please show. And against? And abstentions? 2. Thank you. We move on to 14B, the Independent Remuneration Panel report. Councillor Glass, I understand that this was an item that was called in. Can you advise the council of the outcome of that call-in, please?
So, the Economic and Overview Scrutiny Panel held a meeting for the call-in and Independent Remuneration Panel Members' Allowance Scheme on the 3rd of July 2017. As chair of the panel, I can advise the Council that the resolution was as follows. Resolved that the panel supports the original Cabinet decision made on the 14th of June 2017 and forward it to the Cabinet's recommendation to this Council on the 12th of July for approval.
Councillor Pomfret, can I ask you if you wish to move the recommendation?
I move the recommendations as set out in B 1 to 8 on pages 5 and 6 of the agenda papers to be approved.
Okay,
is that right? Thank you.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Wilson.
Really reports the majority view of the economic OSP, but it is important to note, and it is in the minutes, that there were 3 councillors who opposed this at the call-in. From the outset, I would like to say, and as I said at the call-in, this is not about people or individuals, this is about their roles and responsibilities and positions. In politics, we often get lambasted by residents of the council. I'm sure we've all had the nasty emails, the visits on the doorsteps when we go out knocking on doors saying you're only in it for the money, you're all got your snouts in the trough, you're earning this amount of money. And to be quite honest, if you added up all the hours a councillor does, it comes nowhere near minimum wage. But we do it because we care about our communities. But politicians in the past, both nationally and locally, have made decisions which have got them into quite significant trouble. I'm sure we all remember the MP's expenses scandal some years ago, and we all felt the backlash on the doorsteps. And perhaps if politicians in Westminster had had the same regime as we do of independent panels, then they wouldn't have got themselves into trouble. It is true that we vote on those recommendations and the decision is ultimately ours, but we would be foolish, and I would argue in this instance wrong, to go against the recommendations of the independent panel. We have to answer to the residents of this borough because we are spending their money, not ours, theirs. And we are talking not huge amounts of money in this council, but about these allowances. But it is important nonetheless that we are seen to be beyond reproach, whiter than white, and doing things in an independent manner. Otherwise, we get burnt, just as Westminster did. And so I cannot support the recommendations put forward by Cabinet, which were changed at the last minute, and no one had the opportunity to have sight of those recommendations before they were considered. We are talking about delinking the chair of licensing from planning because, and they were quite specific in their independent report, that the licensing committee does not have the same weight as planning anymore in terms of the weight load on their agenda. Planning quite rightly has a meeting every 3 weeks, and it is a heavy load. But licensing quite often gets cancelled. The chair of licensing doesn't always chair the subcommittees, and when we do have subcommittees, they aren't that frequent. They are on an ad hoc basis. And they were quite clear and emphatic that we should delink and move it onto the basis of the OSP chairs. And I think that is a right decision to make, and we should, as a council, have followed that. And also, we are elected here as members of the borough. And I think it is quite right that they moved, with the exceptions, and there was a safety net provided by the independent recommendations, to stop having the expenses paid for members to travel to the town hall. For effectively, for me, to be paid for coming from my house to here to do my job. It doesn't happen in private industry, it doesn't happen in the public sector. When I go to work, I pay for that myself, and it is expected that I pay for it out of my salary. The same as we get our allowances here as members, we should be paying for that. Unless there is an exceptional hardship, we should be paying for that ourselves, and they made that recommendation in the report. For us to go against these recommendations is dangerous, Mr Mayor, and I think it is highly dangerous of the Cabinet to put this forward, and they should have listened hard to the people that put this forward. They were, indeed, one of them was an expert in his field from a university. Another, a former Labour councillor, a well-known former Labour councillor of this borough, who also put these recommendations together. And another resident of this borough too. We have to answer to the reason, and I take the point that Councillor Copland made, because we do get some individuals who are at the extreme, shall we say, when we deal with them. It should be the reasonable person on the street who we expect and hold ourselves to account and to a higher standard too. And as the Managing Director said, it is about the perception when he gave the censure, it is about the standards we hold ourselves. We are at a higher standard than the members of the public. We should hold ourselves to that higher standard, and we should vote for that higher standard. We should go with the independent recommendations, and I will not be voting along with the Cabinet, and I'll be calling for a recorded vote on this matter, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Condicorn. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, I had Councillor Margrave indicate before. Sorry, Councillor.
Thank you. I will be supporting this motion, but I do have some reservations. But first, I'd like to address Councillor Wilson's comments. At the beginning, I understood he said that councillors don't make the minimum wage on their allowances and all the work, the hard work they do. Now, I've never, as far as I can recollect, taken money in mileage or carers' allowances. But I do look around this council chamber, and while we've made progress on diversity, we've only got one BME member. We could do with more women standing for election, and it's important that we support disabled people. And so if they're earning below the minimum wage, how can we expect people to give up work and come here? And that's why mileage is really important. Now, of course, I would like us to go further, because I have some significant concerns about the carers' allowance portion, because I don't think for £7.50 you can get a carer. And if the only reason you're coming to this authority is your need for, if that's going to stop disabled people or carers coming here, we have to think twice. And I will be asking for OSPs to consider how we can become more diverse and how we can include and encourage disabled people by supporting them in their roles. And that includes changing the time of meetings, because it was mentioned earlier, I think pointed at me possibly, that I didn't turn up, but we need meetings at 6 o'clock when people aren't at work. But this is an important pillar of supporting ordinary everyday people like we all are, because for us to come here and dedicate our time to the borough, because our job isn't to be here, our job's to be out there in the community with Mr. and Mrs. Smith when they've got an issue. It's to be with the children's centre. It's to be with looking around the parks. So we do a lot more than just come here. But actually, we need to make sure that people are not facing barriers. And I'm sure this will be considered. But I do take real concern at Councillor Wilson, who on the one hand says people don't get the minimum wage, then says we're getting a salary, and that we shouldn't claim any mileage. Now, although I don't have to claim mileage because I'm a single bloke and I can afford to live, there are lots of people in this borough who can't afford to live because of your Conservative Party policies. And they're really struggling. And I want them to be councillors so they have a voice in this chamber. And that's why we need to support people with mileage and appropriate allowances. I'm not going to vote against this because I think the Cabinet member has put forward a strong argument. I also think, importantly, we support the independent panel, and I couldn't vote on my own allowances, really. But I do take real umbrage with Councillor Wilson's comments, Mr Mayor.
I wasn't listening as intently as he should be. I did say that there were exceptions provided in the report, particularly for those who are disabled, who would be exempt from the mileage ban. If he had read the report, he would know that.
Councillor Condon.
I did read
Councillor Margrave.
It's a point of personal explanation. I'm perfectly entitled to make that.
Councillor Margrave, take a seat for a moment, please. Just for a moment. The respect that I expect in this chamber. Don't just jump up. I know perhaps you've taken umbrage with something that's been said, but indicate to the Mayor who will allow you to speak when that time comes. Councillor Margrave, please be brief.
I was making comment about my dyslexia in reading the reports, because it was quite offensive what he said, that I don't read reports.
Councillor Margrave.
I did read the reports. I'm quite capable of reading the reports. I've made my comments accordingly.
Councillor Margrave, I don't think anybody that. Right. Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you. I'm in the position now where I'm actually going to be agreeing with an independent person. The work we did with the independent person, every 4 years they come and look at the expenses, compare them to other councils, and also look how big or small the various roles are. And we all lobby. I lobby for various things to go up or down. Not the basic allowance. I think the basic allowance for councillors is right and is set at roughly the right level for the amount of work an average council would do. And obviously, people can argue that this one does too much or this one does, but in the round, it's around the right level. And I do not argue with the level of allowances for our cabinet here. Yeah, in the round, yeah, whether you like them or not, that's a sort of role that's commensurate with that amount of salary. And yeah, it is all fair and reasonable. Where I start to have my issues are with things like the various roles, the chairmanships, which some are very busy, and your good self, as chair of planning, does about 17 meetings a year. They're really long, hard meetings. You have site visits. It is a massive job to be chair of planning. And then we look at some of the other chairs, and I've always had a go at chairs of scrutiny, being some of them only 6 times a year or whatever, and question those. But the independent person didn't agree with me on that. But the one thing the independent person does agree with myself and lots of other people was about the licensing role. The licensing committee now meets 8 times a year officially. Around a quarter or half of those meetings could be cancelled, so we could be talking, say, 5 meetings a year. And if we're talking about almost £5,000 the allowance, 4,600 and whatever, we're talking almost £1,000 per meeting. I know there's a lot of other things around meetings, whatever, but in the world in which we're tight for money, we should be looking at, take the chair planning as a milestone or benchmark. Is the chair of licensing half of that or a quarter of that? And I do think it is reasonable that we agree with the independent person. They're paid around £2,600 to do these reports. Yeah, these reports cost money to do. We've had our arguments. We've all put our case forward, and we should follow the independent person's decisions. We've also looked at mileage. Big councils, Warwickshire, if you were a councillor in Polesworth and you had to go to Warwick and you're on limited income, that is a lot of mileage, a lot of expense. Anywhere in the borough, as long as you don't live in Hull, is relatively close to the town hall. And the admin cost of lots of people claiming for doing 1 or 2 miles here, I think probably about 6 miles is the longest you could do within the borough, is not worth the bother. Yeah, we should say the mileage for driving within the borough is included in your allowance. And if you go to like a planning school in Liverpool, fair, that's in Liverpool, yeah? That's not expected to be in your allowance. That is something extra for which you claim. So I think we should actually follow the advice of the independent person and the independent remuneration panel and set these recommendations and not try and pay ourselves too much for various roles and not try and pay ourselves mileage for puny little journeys unless we're disabled in some way. Thank you.
Councillor Margrave, I'd just like to thank you on behalf of women everywhere for standing up and fighting our corner. Thanks for that. My daughter actually came here with a class, was it yesterday? And it was all to do with Wonder Women, and they were shown around. They were given a lovely speech by Mr. Mayor, and he can probably enlighten you on statistics of women in the council, and I think you might actually be surprised at what he would tell you. if you want more people, i.e. women, in the council chamber, maybe you need to have a diversity officer at your selection process and stand more and get them elected. I'd rather be judged on my work, not my gender, quite frankly, and that's fine if other people would like to be put forward because they're women and whatever, but that's not my bag at all. I'd just like to know, really, what's the point in engaging independent examination and then ignoring it? How do the residents going to take this? What is the point of it in the exercise in futility that has been the independent remuneration panel? And then we just ignore it. And it's no wonder that people out there think that we get accusations levied at us. And I'm sure there are some people that if you work out their hourly rate, they earn less than minimum wage. And I'm sure there's some people that don't, quite frankly. I just think that it's both ways. You can't have an independent panel and then just ignore what they're going to tell you, because that's just, you may as well not bother. It's just a thinly veiled respectability box-ticking exercise, and then we'll just ignore it anyway.
Start at the end of the previous speaker, because it was spoken about recommendations. As a councillor, we deal with recommendations from professional people all the time. Planning's full of it. Every item has a recommendation. And if somebody is saying, whoever it is, that we don't pay any attention to anything other than the recommendation and run with that, why are we here? That's what councils are actually all about. They're not private companies, the professional. We have local knowledge. So that's the recommendation part. The licensing bit, as the current occupant of the post, difficult, and I know it's not personal because, well, it was actually being said to me. Woohoo. And so I knew that was all going to come because people were making the comment. It's not personal, Bob. I don't care. But the licensing one is interesting because in some ways I respect what people are saying. But there's other times when I, as chair of licensing, have been to the magistrates' court to defend decisions of the committee. Now, it's generally the chair. You've been once when I couldn't go chair.
I'm one.
And I was grateful to that. But you're there. You know what courts... Well, you'll know what courts are like. You can be there for something that doesn't take long, but you're sitting there for a while. So it can take up a day. In fact, one case took up 3 days. Now, I'm not saying that happens often, because it doesn't. Planning school. You talk about these people getting training. When was planning school? Planning school's been gone for about 3 years, sadly, but it has been gone. So I think you need some training as to how councils work and what we do.
No, Councillor Condicourt, it's not.
The comment was made. The one thing I want to make a point of. It was mentioned, and we were sort of compared, not a direct comparison, but we were sort of compared with MPs and the trouble that they got into with their expenses. Now, my view of that is quite simple. When that story broke, not by a newspaper I would likely read, the Telegraph, I actually thought, brilliant! It will be all these Tories down there with their fingers everywhere. And then suddenly, I found it was Labour people as well. It was across. Boy, was I angry about that. But let's not even put the two together in the sense of the expenses. That was big money. People went to prison for it. Now, I'm sorry, I can't go along with that. And we won't get our fingers burnt with that. But you're quite right. I did make the point as well about at the meeting about the public and what will the public think. And it is, we have to always remember, in this day and age of the social media and other things, it's the reasonable members of the public. What will they think? Okay, there'll be some people saying, look at all the money they get. But there'll be other people out there saying, you know what, as much as I would like to be a councillor, I cannot afford it. Now, I'm lucky now, I'm retired, I can do more council work, but that's not the case with everybody. I mean, I know there's people that even struggle to get time off work, and they have been elected councillors. Now, it's very difficult for everybody to become a councillor. It's very difficult indeed for some people. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Harvey.
Well, Mr. Mayor, councillors in this authority, we are talking about relatively small amounts of money. If you look what a councillor is paid as a backbench, I hate that term, but backbench councillor is paid, I think it's actually less than the food allowance given to an MP. I've never understood why they get a food allowance. I have to buy my own. But if you look at some of the paragraphs in here, and I know what Councillor Copland said about licensing, Chair, just take my own example. It says that the leader's allowance is most noticeably the lowest when compared to peers. Now, you could look peers up in the dictionary, there's two meanings. And it's not the meaning of the people in the House of Lords, because I think they actually get more than I do just for entering the front door. Mr. Mayor, there is no recognition of the amount of work that councillors do. We have made very little alteration to this. We haven't said lots of people should be given increases. I personally have lost a great deal of money because I couldn't. When I had to go to council meetings, I've lost part of my pension from work, and I've certainly lost a lot of money. So the idea that people are making a fortune out of this is ludicrous. When I go to represent the non-constituents on the Strategic Economic Plan Committee for the whole West Midlands, I help to save the council money by using my own OAP rail pass so that I can get a cheap ticket at the railway. So to sort of say, you're earning too much, it takes me a month to get that back, actually. But the point is, Mr. Mayor, we shouldn't be ashamed of what we pay here. Look around. Look how much people are paid. Look how much Councillor Condacor is a county councillor. Look how much people are paid before they even get the travelling expenses. People here work very hard. And I'm not saying just one party. People here work very hard. And anybody who thinks that 4,900 and something a year, which is taxed, is a great deal of money, then they're living in cloud cuckoo land, Mr. Mayor. People here work for a great deal. I started this morning at 5 o'clock, and that's a regular occurrence. And if you don't believe me, check your emails.
I disagree with a lot of what I've heard tonight. I think people do work very hard. I think a lot of us don't see this as a job, but this is something that we do that's voluntary. We want to put something back into the community. It's not something we're doing for financial gain, because, as the leaders just mentioned, £4,000, I don't know what some of the rest of you do for a living, but, it wouldn't be my hourly rate. But that's not the point. That's not what we're here discussing tonight. If people are unhappy and think that, councillors here and in other councils and local authorities should get a bigger remuneration to draw in people from, that might not otherwise be able to afford it, that's a separate debate. That's an entirely different issue. And I don't think that it's a wrong debate to have. I think that should be held at some point. But tonight, what we're looking at here is as things stand. And the remuneration panel that sat, the independent panel that's looked at it and has made recommendations and has said this is what we should follow. And I think it's incumbent on us to go with that, because there is a subtle difference between adjudicating on planning or some other recommendation that you've had on behalf of, and adjudicating on behalf of the whole borough, to making decisions that are in your own financial interest. And what I've heard tonight is that, it's all the same, and it's not. We have to disclose pecuniary interests where we stand up in meetings. People recognise there's a clear distinction when you're making a decision that doesn't affect you directly and one that does affect you in your own pocket. And this decision will affect certain members in their own pocket. So what I'm saying is we should go along with what the independent members say. And if you want to have a debate about overall allowances, that's for another occasion. Because I think all the people and the press and the residents will distill this down to is hearing that the controlling group wanted to pay themselves more than the allowances that were in the recommendation, And the other catchphrase I heard tonight was £1,000 a meeting. Well, you know, that's good money in anyone's book, and I'm not sure how that looks.
You had the right to reply.
Well, it's an interesting story, this, because the impression has been given, I think, that we're all desperately interested in these matters. In fact, the history of it is that only 5 councillors made any submissions to the independent panel, 3 of them being the group leaders, none from the other side of the chamber, 2 from over here, and I was one of them. It's not all that controversial. I think when we get our next allowance payments, whenever it is, perhaps a month or 2 down the line, Councillor Tromans, if he's still a councillor, will be surprised to find he's probably got less in it than he's got now, so there's no increases involved. I can guarantee that for practically every single councillor. In fact, there's probably, you know, compared to the cost of living and so on, a reduction. But there's bringing facts into the matter. I went along to the ONS to hear what people had to say about the Cabinet's recommendations, and a lot of the arguments which have been aired now were aired there. I have a lot of sympathy with the workload arguments that has been pointed out. You know, we're just going to have to put up with it. And I have a great deal of sympathy with the ideas behind the equality of access to being a councillor, because there still seems to be an assumption, well, really, it's just a matter of preference. Well, in really, you know, in many walks of life, you find it very difficult to get time off, certainly with pay, and you're going to have to forgo income. And surprisingly, in the day of austerity, you know, there's lots and lots of people who don't want to do that. So we do need to look at that, and as has been pointed out too, this report doesn't really look into it. At the ONS, it was very interesting to hear people who just said, now we need to go along with the panel's recommendations, arguing against them. So I assume they think we just accept the recommendations because they're the recommendations, as pointed out by Councillor Copland. That's not our job. We need to look at recommendations and decide whether they fit, in this case, the workings of our council here. Arguments were given at the overview and scrutiny against the training SRA. I think there was a voice perhaps in favour of it, but generally the feeling was, well, it perhaps was a good idea, but it wouldn't work in the form presented by the remuneration panel. So apparently, even though it's going to work, people are saying we should accept it. People were saying, well, the ONS chairs should be remunerated at a lower level. Well, we have people saying they're going to go along with that even though they don't agree with it. It's a bit confusing, isn't it? The Cabinet has come up with some recommendations, and I propose we move to approve Cabinet's recommendations. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay, thank you. In a request for a recorded vote, Alan, if you can run through that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will read out the name of each member, who will then indicate if they are for or against this motion. Councillor Aldington. For. Councillor Beaumont. For. Councillor Bennett. For. Councillor Bonner. Against. Councillor Brindley. Against. Councillor Copland. For. Councillor Daffin. For. Councillor Doughty apologies. Councillor Elliott. For. Councillor Gazane. Against. Councillor Glass. For. Councillor Golby. Against. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Against. Councillor Hancox.
For.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Haynes.
For.
Councillor Jackson. For. Councillor Kondaka.
Against.
Councillor Tony Lloyd apologies. Councillor Ian Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Longdon.
For.
Councillor Margrave.
For.
Councillor Caroline Phillips. For. Councillor Neil Phillips.
For.
Councillor Gwyn Pomfret.
For.
Councillor Margaret Pomfret. For. Councillor Jill Shepherd. Councillor Tracy Shepherd. Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Tandy apologies. Councillor Tromans.
Against.
Councillor Watkins.
For.
And Councillor Wilson.
Against.
Okay, the motion being carried, that concludes the business of the evening. Can I thank you very much for your attendance and declare the meeting closed.